All right, great. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for making it through the first pre. Now that we've got those, brain synapses in place, it'll be much easier going forward. I promise. The first pre is tough. You're learning the system, you're learning all the different questions, and it can be a challenge. And so we kind of gave you a lot of information the first time to be able to do it at all. And I think here we can kind of refine, the way we're answering questions and so forth. And we really, with the issues, we weren't focusing on the score per se. We were focusing on just trying to help you understand the goals. So with that, us, skip the welcome slide. So we have, so as Yuta mentioned, the first hour here will be pre-evaluations. First, Alex is going to go over some of those FAQs with the system about how to enter things and so forth. Then I'm going to go over some common issues and take homes from the practice pre's, and then we'll do an open Q&A, and then we'll quickly go into how to address issues. And so hopefully we have time for all that before the second hour, which is when we'll talk about reviewing pre's. So this is folks that come in and look at a pre and give comments back like we did with the issues. So that's the plan. And this is informal, by the way. So I have a lot of text on my slides. This is sort of like notes for me, but this is meant to be informal. So we can do things like, raise the hand, just to interrupt and ask questions. We can't get too waylaid on any given issue, but we'll try to answer questions as they come up. So, all right, so the first thing was going to be Alex going ahead with the FAQs.
Okay, and I can go ahead and share my screen, I think.
Okay. Guess we do have a little back and forth.
Yeah, hopefully that's okay. Okay, and sorry, this isn't in the slides, but hopefully you can all see. I did share this document with everyone, I think in a previous email. And these FAQs are really just more of technical questions that I got about how to navigate certain aspects of the website. I know we did kind of run into some permissions issues, and I think hopefully we've worked all of those out. So that being said, so for the first FAQ, how do I add sources? You should have an add source button on this top gray toolbar at the top of your page once you're logged into pre. If you do not have the add source button, let me know, because that means something's wrong with the website permissions. And that's something I'll have to fix separately. So email me if you don't have an add source option. But what the add source button does, that is your main way of adding your citations and your references for your pre. And it's almost, it's a little bit separate from your actual evaluation. I mean, you're going to use it in your evaluation, but it's this whole separate page that opens up. So I did want to mention that because I think it feels like a slightly different process or side process that's happening in adjacent to the pre-evaluation. So you hit the add source button, and that will take you to the create bibliographic reference page. If you are using the reference manager, Zotero, you want to use this top box to paste your bib text in. So that's where you can use the bib text sort of format, and that will be able to automatically pull in all the information about your reference. If you're entering citations manually, and that's completely fine, I know a lot of people are, you're going to be more concerned with this second box, the select a publication type. And once you select a publication type, whether it's book or website or journal article, then a whole other, a whole other field of topics will come down, and then you'll be able to fill in author name, date, source, where it was published, all that good stuff. So that is something you want to do for every reference that you have. Some references, especially because some of the plants are already in the system for this practice pre. A lot of us were, we were doing multiple pre's on the same few species. Some of your references may already be in the website bibliography, and you might just be able to like associate an existing reference. But if your reference is completely new to the bibliography, you're going to want to use this system to add your reference. And then once you've added your reference, what you're going to want to do in order to make it easier to find later when you are in the pre-evaluation, you want to make sure you associate your reference with the plant that you are evaluating. That way, when you look up your reference to associate it later, it will be one of the options there, and all you have to do is click a checkbox and then hit save. I'm also totally willing to go over this with folks separate from this training. So if this is something that you've kind of struggled with for this practice pre, and you really want to make sure you get it down for the next pre that you do, reach out to me. We can schedule like a half-hour Zoom call, and I could just walk you through it. I think with this sort of thing, it's a lot easier when you actually see it happening in front of you, because there's a lot of buttons to click, but once you kind of see it, it makes more sense, I think. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next evaluation, or the next FAQ. So how do you associate a source with your evaluation? So this is when you're actually in your pre and you're answering questions and you want to find that source that you entered into the bibliography. This is how you do it. So when you're working under the edit tab in your evaluation, you can go ahead to the reference widget and hit the add items button. And there are multiple ways to search for a source, but the easiest way, for me anyway, is when you search by the plant. When you search by the species name in the little drop-down menu. So when you hit add items, this text box that you see on the screen, that will pop up, and you can search specifically by the plant species to see which references already exist in the system for that plant. And the reference, whether you've added it yourself or someone else has added it, may very well exist in the system already. If it isn't, you add it like I showed you before. But yeah, I find searching by the species that I'm evaluating really helps, because that narrows down the options significantly. And then from there, you just select the relevant source. There's a little checkbox on the left-hand side, and you can select more than one at a time if you are trying to put multiple references in for this answer. And then you just hit submit, and then it saves. So that's kind of the next step for the references. There is, I'm not going to go over everything about bib text here. It is a little bit more in depth, and there's a whole help page on that. That's something we would cover maybe separately or offline. Also, because I would personally go to the help tab to answer that question. So I won't bother reading off the help tab to you. One of the other big questions we got was, how do I associate my evaluation with my organization? And especially for this project, it's really important that you associate your evaluation with the 2021 WIPM grant project organization, because that's how we're able to make sure that all the appropriate people have access to view it. So associating an organization with your evaluation, you scroll all the way down to the bottom of your pre that you're working on, and there is this organization ownership and access toolbar, this little gray toolbar. And so all you have to do is click that to expand it. And then you have a whole checklist of every organization that's registered on the pre website, and you want to associate it with the 2021 Western IPM grant project, as well as whichever organization you're representing for this project. And then be sure to save and continue, or hit save at the end so that everyone will be able to see it later. And then at the very end, some folks were wondering, how do you mark your evaluation as submitted? This is one of the few kind of tools that isn't in the edit tab, it's in your evaluation tab. And when you scroll down only about like a quarter way down the page, there is a little menu on the right-hand side of the page, and you can toggle between in progress and submitted there, and then just hit save, and that should change the status of your evaluation. And we can send this whole FAQ page out again at the end of this training. So that way you'll have all this information for reference later. And I'm going to go ahead and stop share so that Lynn can put her PowerPoint back up.
And as Lynn is doing that, one comment with respect to the status, I believe that we have it arranged now that only the lead for your particular organization, the manager for your organization, can move an assessment from submitted to completed. So reminder on that, and that is an important step to completing an assessment at the very end.
Okay, thank you. Great. All right, carrying on, I just wanted to take us back a little bit to just remind us of the value of the tool and how it was designed. So Utah had sent this paper on Cancer et al. 2015 that was discussed really the development of the tool and you know the purpose and the evaluation of the tool academically. So what's you know, essentially it's a cost-effective way to prevent introduction of invasive ornamental plants. And it was developed for use in the landscape and nursery industry specifically. And the idea was that it would be able to be used for these plants that, you know, maybe weren't traditional weed risk assessments weren't really tied into being able to address these plants. So that's really what it was developed for. And let's see, and then California wildland plants as well. And it was assessed to have 95% accuracy with predicting invasiveness and non-invasiveness. And that's, of course, given that it's used correctly and the instructions are followed and there's a literature search as well. So that paper is available to look at. All right. Overall, I wanted to say, you know, good job to everyone who completed evaluations. I know we gave you a lot of information. You were just learning the system. It probably took you quite a while to do that first one, but not, like I said, hopefully all those pathways are in place and you can get dialed in and more comfortable. Yeah, yay, everybody. As you go forward, I found that, you know, once you're doing, you know, maybe even a few in a day, you really get on a roll. You figure out, you know, which tabs you have open. You have, okay, I'm going to have the USDA map and the GBIF map open at the same time, you know, and then I'm going to do these questions, and then I'm going to do my Google Scholar search or whatever and do these questions, and you'll get kind of a rhythm. So I thought it was really good job everyone interpreting the criteria. especially with the biology questions where a lot of people really got into that. Some people got into taxonomy, some people got into the biology, all sorts of things. So good job. We do have some take homes, just some tips from various things we common themes we saw looking at the evaluation. So, some common questions or issues we're having to do with climate matching map and following the guidance for interpretation. And I'm going to go through these kind of one by one. So we'll just look at the first two first. So, and then citing the climate map you used and the location information. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about that first on these first couple slides here. And as we go through, if there are questions, I think Nikki's going to look at the chat and probably Yuta as well, so that we can come up, with questions. If you need to interrupt me, that's fine. Okay, so here we have, let's say, a climate matching map for, this is going in using the tool, clicking on California. So I clicked on California, I created my PDF that I saved, on my desktop or in my folder, and then I associated it with my evaluation. So for my evaluation, I said, this is the climate match I'm using, and it's uploaded right there. So this is what that screenshot from that, this is the pre-combined layers. So let's say we're looking at this. This is the climate matching map I have. Okay, and then going through the questions, assuming this is a little bit of a real species and a little bit fictitious here, but let's say this is the information I have. So let's say the first question we're looking at, okay, I got GBIF up for my species. And so it's a global biodiversity information facility that has distribution information for species throughout the world. You can also, of course, use USDA or what you like. But in general, this is pretty good for, it holds, herbarium information and iNaturalist information, all sorts of occurrences. So has a species become native where it's not, or naturalized where it is not native? So remember, naturalized, just occurring in the wild, occurring maybe on roadsides. We're not talking about garden plantings, we're talking about in the wild. So let's say it was native to where this green box is, this species. We see naturalizations obviously throughout the world. If we saw one dot, only one dot, let's say in South America, we might click on that record and make sure it's not inside a botanic garden. But if we have tons of records, usually that means it's naturalized. So we're going to say yes to that first question. Then, second question, that's where the climate match comes in. Is a species noted as being naturalized in the US or world in a similar climate? And so I did my best, geographic projections be darned, to line the maps here. And this is sort of what you do maybe side by side on a screen. So we have in green, this is where the climate match is in green, and these are where the occurrences are. And so yes, so it's naturalized, outside its native range in an area that matches the climate. So that's a yes. Okay, how about number 3? So this is back to, is a species noted as being invasive in the world, US or world? And so now we don't have to worry about the climate match here. We're just saying, is it invasive? And let's say I had some reports from here, from here, from here, and from here. And so yes, we have reports of it being invasive. And we'll talk about the bar for invasiveness in a little bit. Okay, so that's a yes. All right. So this is a species noted as being invasive in the US or world in a similar climate. So that's putting two things together now. So now we have to find one of these circles where it's invasive, where it's also a matching climate. And I've said, okay, this is invasive here, but let's say the climate doesn't match. So not that one, but we have yes here, here, and in South Australia there. So that's how I would evaluate that. And of course, I would zoom in and actually take a little bit of a look here and make sure these match, but let's say that we had that information. So that would be a yes. So 2 pieces of information, climate match and invasive. Okay, and number 6. So number 5 had to do with species in other genera or related genera. So we'll skip that one for now. I think you can figure that one out. This one, so is it found predominantly in the climate matching the region of concern? Okay, so my region of concern is California. Okay, remember the green is all the climate match for California. And now I have to say on the balance, 50-50 are most of the occurrences in a climate matching, excuse me, the region of concern. And there are kind of 2 ways to do this. One is to kind of take a look and you look at, okay, where are the preponderance of these hexagons? Are they primarily outside? I'd say on the balance, yes. So let's take so you could write that, found mostly in the United States, throughout the United States, mostly doesn't match, and you can list some areas that match and some areas that don't match. And then what we'll do, because we think, yeah, this is probably not a climate match because we have big, big areas that don't match, right? So then we'll take it and then we'll look at those ecozones, okay? That's in another map on your PDF sheet and that same thing, and say, okay, let's see how many ecozones it is. And I think it was about 4 here, okay? Okay, and then this is a little bit more due diligence. Let's take a look at just you could just Google, UN ecozones and find a map like this, okay? And so I said, okay, approximately 4 ecozones, it is present, 4 ecozones match and it's present in them. And I found about 5 that it was present in that did not match. And that matches my initial answer as well. If you're really seeing vast areas outside the climate match, then it's probably a no there. So again, this is showing zones that match on the lower right. This is showing all the zones on the upper right. And so we're seeing, areas of, dark brown, medium green, deep blue, light blue, beige. You don't have to worry about even the names. We're just counting them. And of course, this is meant to be efficient. And so we recognize this is a little bit subjective. So I hope that helps. So again, you can count your hexagons, look at the preponderance outside, inside, and then check the ecozone number. So this one, what really got it was that US Southeast, which really didn't meet the climate criteria. Okay, and we can always come back to that if we have more questions after we go through these. Okay, another, show your work. We definitely stressed efficiency, and, you really just need the minimum amount of information to answer the questions sometimes, but please show your work and support your answer as specifically as you can. But again, being efficient. So you don't have to find 5 peer-reviewed studies. I'd say, maybe the first 2 you put them in, but after that, you're done. You don't need to cite them all if they all have the same information. Review the rules for assigning confidence. So I'm going to go and look at that. Okay, so confidence, remember that checkbox, the drop down on each question. So again, looking at this, it can feel like you're supposed to just, how confident am I in the answer? But there's actually some criteria involved. So remember, very low. If you have very low confidence because you didn't find any information, of course, the question should be left blank. If it's low confidence, question defaults to generally a no answer, except check the help for each question, please. Medium is where you get into where you can assign a yes answer. So that's observational, unpublished information, or published, confirmed by a professional in the field, or the parent information for a cultivar. So this is essentially a biologist goes out, reports something, and it finds its way into a report. So maybe it's an observational piece of information, but it's like an unpublished report. And then you go up from there. So other peer-reviewed studies, reports from agencies, and then highly credible scientific information, peer-reviewed studies would be very high. So there are a few gray areas here, but in general, that's what we want to use to assign confidence. And always check that help menu to make sure you're knowing whether you can default to no or not. Okay, so, so here, remember that the help tips under each question, you have that little caret, click here to, show help or hide help. The answer will be yes or no, should never go unanswered. So that tells you things like this defaults to no, this doesn't, and you have to answer it or you don't have to make it a valid evaluation. So make sure to find that. Okay. Enter your references. I know, I think we were trying to be very efficient here, and the idea was really to get the concept and to understand how to answer the questions. But answering references is a skill also. So we want to always practice that and do so. If they're, don't just drop the website link into the answer, please enter it into the system as Alex described. And really say to source for all information. If you're saying, I did not find information on invasiveness, maybe tell us where you looked tell us you looked in the global invasive species book or something. So tell us a couple sources you looked at for absence information. Also general information. The plant is 10 inches high, so it's not likely to impede movement of animals. Tell us where you found that information. Is it a botanic garden? Was it the Jepson website? Is it a herbarium, specimen? Tell us where you found that. And include all the information. The idea is that reviewers should be able to look over a review ideally in about a half an hour, or look over an evaluation in about a half an hour. So we don't want reviewers having to be chasing down references to try to find context. You might have quoted this plant, starts a lot of fires, in Southeast Australia, and you only include that piece of information. Well, they might be tempted to go try to track it down and see who said that and why, et cetera. So just try to give them enough information so they don't have to click on that website or find that, Western garden book off their shelf. So go ahead and provide anything you think is relevant within reason. Okay. So that's kind of the biggest take homes. I mean, you did great. So that's sort of the biggest sort of issues we saw. And then I'm going to go through a couple questions that were common. People had common questions on. So question 9 was a little tricky. So is the plant a health risk to humans or animals, fish? Has the species been noted as impacting grazing systems? So this is a tricky question. The guidance says, okay, is it a reasonable likelihood? So on the left in blue, I have the guidance. Is it a reasonable likelihood that it would be ingested at a high enough rate that it would cause poisoning or death should it escape? And the example given is a plant occurs in a riparian area and it can cause fish kills when the foliage touches the water. So that's injuring a fish and it's a biological pollutant in that case. So that's a yes. Where it gets tricky is where something is listed on a poisonous plants list. It's not quite enough information just to be listed. And the reason is because that could be anything from causing asthma in a very small percentage of population, or it could be causing irritation to the skin that could be a problem for immune compromised people or something. So we need to know a little bit more. And that's kind of the tricky part. So cases listed in the literature are a real help. If you can find cattle have been poisoned, in Europe from this species, that helps a lot. So imagine, poisonings could occur when something's incorporated into hay bales, or fruits that are poisonous to many species might be a yes. Leaves that cause significant harm when touched. So that would be like a real problem when it's in a wildland situation. So it's hard because I feel like the guidance leaves open a little interpretation there. So that's going to be a little bit subjective, but just imagine an urgent care ER visit, serious poisoning, death kind of issues, as opposed to it's listed as slightly poisonous and it might give, children a bellyache a little bit. So that's what we have there. I know that was a little bit tricky for people. Any questions on that? Want to go over it? Okay, a lot of the guidance is meant to be as succinct as possible. So we don't want to have like pages and pages of guidance. So it can be, you have to interpret it pretty strictly. Okay, all right. Vegetative reproduction and spread. This is a little bit confusing as well. And I think I went through this pretty fast in the training, to be fair. So question 11 is really about, and I actually didn't list the question here, apologies for that, but the idea is, can it reproduce this way naturally? So can it spread by rhizomes, stolons, tubers, corms, et cetera? And can it do it at all in a natural setting? That's the question. It's not, so you're trying to rule out things that can't reproduce vegetatively is essentially what you're trying to do. So if it can only reproduce by seeds, that's a no. If it can do this at all without humans, then it's a yes. And whether or not it's likely to contribute to invasiveness is kind of another issue. This is just, can it do it? Is it likely to happen? Second question, that gets into more the invasiveness issue, which is can it spread away from the parent plants this way? So is fragmentation contributing to spread. So species that are capable of increasing their numbers by vegetative means by detached fragments. So roots or stem fragments can, go along a stream bank and root again. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. Other things like vine growing species that can creep along and then root again at nodes, that would be yes, or Arundodonax type. So giant reed where the rhizomes are floating down a stream and respreading. So subtle difference between those two. Just wanted to hammer that home. Do you have any questions coming up about that? Okay, good. And again, most of this is in the help, so you can probably, you can use this PowerPoint, but you could also probably find this answer in the help. Invasiveness, this is a tricky issue, okay? So invasiveness, the idea is to answer yes to invasiveness in those early questions. Is this species invasive, outside or inside a similar climate? It has to cause economic or environmental damage. And I think we all understand that. We understand that there's naturalized, which is something that's just occurring. It's maybe not causing damage. And then there's invasive, which is a higher bar. So those two are different. And I think we're all familiar with that. But the issue comes down to kind of evidence for it. And so if there's no evidence, obviously the answer is no. It might be widespread, or it might be called aggressive in gardens, in urban settings, potentially in those like urban cemented, urban drool environments. But we really have to know that it's doing so outside cultivation. If it has to be causing damage, yeah. So the issue with noxious weed lists is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the plant is in the region of interest. So sometimes noxious weed lists are used preventatively. And so it's listed on your state noxious weed list, but it actually hasn't arrived yet, or is only invasive in a single cornfield or something. But actually, if you saw evidence of that, then yes. But if you don't have that information, then no. You also need, and this is tricky, you need more information than a simple checklist. So you might even see a PDF produced, or brochure produced by, let's say, local garden club or something that says these species are invasive, and it just lists the names. We need more information than that. So that's like, I think you could include it in your answer, but remember, we need that bar to be an observation by a professional of some kind. So useful information, but not quite enough. I'd say try to stick to the standard sources for invasiveness. And of course, new weeds might not be on this. We know that. But if they're listed and it actually says not invasive, that's probably a red light flashing for you that like, okay, they have it listed, but they are saying not invasive. So we're going to consider that. Weeds of California, CABI, Queensland Biosecurity, Randall, Compendium of Weeds. That's one I was trying to come up with earlier. So those can be, the latter with the codes and the references are a little tricky, but you should be able to figure out if it's listed or not there. So also, yeah, so be wary in general of miscategorization and spread in urban only environments. And also, rule out misuse of the term, aggressive, weedy, invasive in the true sense. And remember, we need, for a yes, we need an observational, confirmed information by a professional in the field. So that's the bar we've set there for invasiveness. We have noticed, there's a plethora of information on the web. People are really interested in invasive species, some sort of trained to understand what invasive means and some not. So we just have to be wary there. So a little tricky, but that's the hard line is observational or confirmed information. And so here's an example. So deciding on invasiveness for a pre. So look at the statement. So are there specific instances described? Is there evidence or description of invasive, behavior or invasiveness? Then evaluate the source. Who did it come from? Is it primary information or is it being quoted somewhere else? And what's the qualifications of the best source listed? Is the source named at all? Or is it just sort of like given without any reference. And then apply context. So sometimes you might see, again, it's not listed by certain organizations. So you have to consider that. You know, but maybe they were missing the primary evidence at that time, and now we know more. So you have to do some thinking here in some cases. So include all this information in the answer, the source, the statement, the context, and then to the best of your ability, let's say you have the name of the plant on a list from a local botany club, but it doesn't say anything else. It just says invasive, or it's just listed. That's relevant, but not enough. Medium, we've got the club included also descriptions of invasiveness provided by a named professional, or the professional is the author of the pamphlet. That would be better. You know, higher would be like a resource conservation agency described invasiveness in the context of they were monitoring for endangered species and this was invasive, or they were going out to look at vegetation in this park and it was aggressive, invasive, and displacing plants. And then very high peer-reviewed study, you know, declines of native species, etc. So hopefully this is something a little bit more clear cut that you can apply moving forward. So, okay. Briefly, I think we're okay on time, but I want to be sure to leave time for questions. And so related genera, some people were really, really creative and got into like clades and taxonomy, and that's great. Not all of us know this stuff. But I found it helpful if you're looking at related genera that might be invasive to, you know some old names for the taxa, you know, Stipa, Nacella, kind of going back and forth. So you might look that up, understand, okay, another name that the species is assigned to, and use that to look at, relatedness. Sometimes things are totally just miscategorized, but it's a good, just sort of a clue to what else might be related. And then review your answers when finished, because sometimes it's often the way I do it. I'm really doing my literature search as I go through. Luckily, I know what questions are coming up, and now you know what questions are coming up, so you can use all the information in the source, but sometimes you do discover relevant information later. So sometimes you see that information at the end and you realize, oh, I better go back and change that one answer from no to yes. And if there's evidence on both sides, put all that information in and make a decision. It doesn't mean you did this wrong. It happens to all of us. And sometimes there is just conflicting information. That's fine, but it's best to really go back and incorporate that information. Because if we go through, or for viewers looking at your evaluation, they get down to the bottom and you're listing, information about invasiveness, and displacing native plants and causing damage. And the last question, not that anyone did that, by the way. And then we see no for invasiveness, that's a problem. So make sure to go back and review your answers. Again, this is kind of a innocent until proven guilty assessment. So often you don't have information until you've been through all your literature search. So, and then reassess the confidence level that you gave the question. So I hope that makes sense. Also, don't be afraid of Google Scholar. Even if you are not connected to an academic institution or library that gives you access to primary literature, that's often paywalled, right? And by Springer or whoever, often you can see the abstract at least, and that might be enough information for you. You type in this species, Lathyrus latifolius, and you get, some information here. And often you can just find, at least, like I said, the abstract, and that might be enough. So don't be afraid to use that, because that gives you, remember, high confidence if it's noted there. Okay, all right, so how to review. So now we're all putting on our reviewer hats. So this is a different role. You still log in the same way, but now you've been given permission at that point to do a review of somebody else's evaluation. And so since you're all mostly familiar with the guidance on how to do pre's in general, but remember there is guidance throughout the pre-tool screen. And actually, just in case anyone hasn't seen that, we'll just, let me actually try to do, let's see, new share. Oh, there we go, screen. Okay. we'll go to, all right, so this is, again, pre-tool system, so my evaluations, et cetera, my, my reviews, when I reviewed, let's see, so essentially this is, oops, sorry, let me try again. Bear with me. Oh, Lynn, sweet. Loading. Do we have any questions while we're waiting in the chat? Are we good?
There's no
Okay.
questions.
Okay. So for anyone that hasn't done a review, essentially you log in, you should have your affiliations listed, maybe your picture. That's all handled through the pre-tool administrators. You look at, so you've been given a plant to evaluate. You're going to click on evaluations at the top here. So you're not going to add an evaluation. This is all actions that essentially the evaluators are doing beforehand. You're going to kind of live in this bar for this moment. So click on the evaluations. Let's say you've been assigned to evaluate, this species. So either you could get it from the drop down here, probably find it there. Let's see, I'm trying to find one that I did. Let's see, I don't know. Well, I can't remember. Anyway, so apply. And you see a couple evaluations of this plant done by different entities, and you're going to click on it, and that's where you find their evaluation. Okay, and so there's the name of the plant here, and there's evaluation, and you're not going to edit their evaluation. You're only going to look at it here, or maybe even look at a PDF, depending on how we want to do the process. So you could download a PDF and just read that, or you can go in this screen, but you're not going to be editing their evaluation at all. And then you're going to go ahead and add and deal with this issues tab. Sorry, add evaluation issue, which I'm going to get to in the presentation. But I just wanted to familiarize you with the layout of the website and how that works. So it can be a little confusing with various bars, and we're here to help, certainly, as you go through the process. But again, starting with either plants or evaluations, probably evaluations, and then find the plant you're supposed to evaluate. Okay. All right. Let's see. I think I can go straight into my presentation from here. Okay. All right. So, so there's guidance in the help menus in the pre-tool. So you should become familiar with how to answer pre-questions guidance. So that is a PDF that has all the answers and essentially what we've gone through. So you should basically be trained as an evaluator to do the review in order to make sure they've answered the questions correctly. But your job is to assess the integrity of the evaluation. So again, go to evaluations in the upper part of the navigation, click on the title column to sort by species name, and click on the species to open it. And we looked at that. I just wanted to note, sometimes there are some older links hanging around. I think Alex has really done a great job in making sure none of them point to this, but if you ever do click on a link and it says, broken link and do not enter or something, that's probably the old website there. So if you have a pre.ice.ucdavis.edu, that does not work. So pre-tool is where you want to be in. So know that.
One other quick comment. I sent you the link to the video, how to review a pre. So, if you haven't watched that, watch it. It's also a good refresher if you feel rusty on it.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so your job is to decide on the validity of the assessment. So determine if the answer that you see, yes, no, or left blank, is justified based on your knowledge of the plant and what they have there. That's the idea. So, and some of this I've drawn from the actual help inside how to do a review, and some of this I've created, just so you know. Make sure the screener confidence level is appropriate for each question based on the sources given. So again, we discussed, unverified information versus, peer-reviewed studies. And ensure that the highest quality sources are used, essentially, and did they justify their answer? And I want to note that they the screener, so let's say you have knowledge of 16 other peer-reviewed studies on the species, but the screener had an appropriate study cited, had an appropriate level of information there, and it was valid information. They don't need to cite all 16 studies. So it's a little bit different than your literature review paper or something like that. They only need to cite enough legitimate studies to justify the answer. So you might know of other studies, and you can list it as a comment, but they didn't necessarily need it to include that information. And so look at that. So read the justification, make sure that it's like logical, credible, and that's where it really helps as an evaluator to, you know, write complete sentences, try to include all the information you can, and make sure they didn't leave out any relevant data or important sources. So, because you might know of other sources, and so you can go ahead and tell them about that. So your main job is to decide whether the scores for each question are valid based on the information provided. All the questions are yes or no, which you know. There are no partial points. They're either yes, no, or unanswered, and there's no partial points. The system deals with the points. You don't have to deal with that. So when you look at a plant, there's the name, there's the pre-score, and that determines, you know, whether it passed the test or not, essentially, right, of potential invasiveness. This is the number of questions the reviewer answered. So they answered 18, and that's enough to pass, to make it a valid evaluation. So that's check mark yes. This is some information about their confidence and some different statistics. The status was completed. And so this over here, you really don't have to worry about. You're really looking at each question and each answer and whether it's valid. All right, so they do need to answer, and again, this is calculated by the system and kept track of in separate ways. They need to answer 16 out of 20 questions to have a reliable pre-score. So hopefully they did so. If you have information on questions they did not answer, certainly add that and give it, you know, give them that information. Some questions have, you know, no information and there are 0 points, but they don't count towards the 16 answers. You know, and screener confidence, like we've gone over, is based on the source of the information, the authority. Some questions default to a no without evidence. And so check that help tab. So if you're, again, in the system, you can do that drop down and see the pre-guidance, which is essentially the same thing as that PDF sheet of guidance telling you how to answer the question when it can be left as unanswered. Okay, any questions so far? See a couple.
Hey, Lynn, this is Doug.
Hey, Doug.
I think you may have mentioned this earlier. Howdy.
Hey.
But if you're reviewing and the answer is a no to a question, do you expect to see a list of citations like these are all the things I checked and did not find, either found that it said no or did not find evidence of yes?
I expect to see a couple. Yeah, personally, I would do that. To say, yeah, US, you know, I'm trying to think of an example, but yeah, I would list the sources you check to say no, and expect to see that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, within reason.
Great, thanks.
Especially, you know, maybe you've done other evaluations and you have, like, look at the last plant you evaluated. Where did you check for that one? You know, did you have information from the, you know, fire management authority of somewhere, and it listed that it was the species contributed to wildfire there, but this species not listed or says does not contribute to wildfire or something. So yeah. Yep, good practice. Okay. All right. So just a note on citations, most of you are evaluators as well. So the reviewers may add additional information about a relevant reference if that helps substantiate the answer. So it may still be, you're not saying they said they answered the question wrong. They just, here's an additional study that they could enter. So you could put in the citation for them. If you work in wildlands and you're a professional, you could add a personal observation as well. Actually, I think I have that down here somewhere, sorry. Essentially, if you have a personal observation, put exactly what you'd like to them to put in the evaluation. I have seen this plant invasive in meadows in the Sierras in XYZ locations, and put it in quotes and then put your name and affiliation. That's how you'd like it to be cited. You know, I'm a professional forester and I've seen this. This is the observation. So you can do that, if that makes sense. Personal observations can be added to the database as well. All right, so.
Quick question on personal observation. Would you use today's date?
Yeah, you'd use the date that you, I'm trying to remember the what the system gives you when you're doing personal communication. Does anyone remember that? In general, yeah, I can't remember offhand. It should guide you through it, but I would put the quote, the your name and affiliation, and the date you communicated it. So as if you'd pretend you're sending the reviewer an email. I mean, the evaluator an email. Pretend that.
Oh, right.
Like,
Right. That would be something else you would put in first before you link it to the thing. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, let's say, so there are two ways to do this. Let's say I just talked to Doug Gibson. I'm an evaluator. I talked to Doug Gibson and he says, okay, this is invasive in the lagoon. We've seen it for X number of years, blah, blah, blah. I can put that in quotes in my answer and then put Doug Gibson, send whatever the new name of his affiliation is. And then, communicated, July 19th, 2021. That's what I would put as an evaluator. Now let's say if I didn't include that information and Doug Gibson is the reviewer, he is going to go in and he'll say, I observed this. Okay, I have a comment, or maybe it's a major change to my, maybe it's a major issue. I have seen this being invasive. So he'll put what he wants to have in there in quotes, his name, affiliation, and date in the issue. And then that way the evaluator, then I can go back and add that. Does that make sense? Maybe I've made
it makes
more
sense for
confusing.
if you talk to somebody, else, if it's like me doing the assessment and me going, oh, I have seen that, then the personal communication is like with me. So I'm a little confused.
That's okay. You can put your personal observation in as long as you put yourself in the system as personal communication and the date. Yeah. So we could go over that a bit more if we have time, but yeah, you'll get it. Okay. Sometimes sometimes all you have is you're trying to, get through an evaluation. The evaluator, especially early on in the process, would only have maybe other literature reviews. If it's reliable, if it's maybe in a peer-reviewed literature review, you can use that literature review as long as it's authoritative and consistent. Because remember, we talked about primary observations and secondary. So somebody summarizing primary observations, you might be able to cite that summary. In general, it's best to cite the primary source of the information, but you can cite an authoritative source that's summarizing information, like in a book. So Joe DiTomaso's book, you could cite the entry in the book because, that's an authority, DiTomaso and Healy, or another book about invasive plants of XYZ state. You could cite the book, in other words. You don't need to reread every reference. Of course, as a reviewer, the goal is to have enough of information in the evaluation that you don't have to do that. Citations, let's see, this is more if you've never seen this. So citations link for each question's linked to an entry in the bibliography. So you can find the original references. There's some websites where they might just list the reference and not the specific entry for some species. So just know that it might just say it might not cite the chapter or section. It might just say, this is the reference. Sometimes, let's see, so please give them direct links to any other information you have. And sometimes at the end, we could actually look at it. But anyway, at the end of the evaluation, sometimes they've actually provided web links to the sources. So that's an easy way to click on it. And some websites have no dates associated. So your job isn't to nitpick the way they entered citations unless it's totally incorrect. Your job is to just know that they're there, make sure that they're there. Sorry about the screenshot here. I guess I blew it up a little too much, but essentially, remember you're looking at the website, you've clicked on evaluations, you've found the plant, you've clicked on evaluation. This is what you'll see. I guess this person perhaps didn't have an option to edit. You might have the option to edit, but remember, you're not editing their evaluation. You're not doing that. You're editing only issues. But what you're gonna do is actually click down here, add issue on the bottom right. So add issue. And after clicking evaluation, add evaluation issue, you'll be taken to that new screen where you can enter information. So choose the scope of the issue. So choose the narrowest scope. There's a list of questions there, and there's also, general information. But if it's just about one question, then pick that question from the dropdown. And if it is repeated in multiple places in the evaluation, you want to do one for every time it happens. So there's an issue for question 4 and 6 and 8 because the reviewer or the evaluator, let's say, didn't provide citations. So we want an issue for every time something happens. Create a new issue for if there's multiple issues for the question, they didn't have citations and you disagree with the answer because they're not interpreting the guidance correctly. Those are two different issues. So you're going to do add issue, do the issue, add another issue, and then do it again. Okay, so some more guidance. Leave the issue visibility as private. If you think a reference should be added, include that citation link, one comment per issue, or one set of text per issue. And add your name at the bottom of the comment because it actually doesn't show automatically. So you're going to write, good answer, please, you need to cite, Healy et al. 2015, and then right under that Lynn suite. That's how I would add an issue so that you know who it came from. Let's see, click, and then you click, this is just sort of internal. You click on the evaluation tab to get back to the evaluation. And if the issue is opened a new tab, so when you click on it, it'll open a new tab, then you can close it after you save. It's a little confusing, but just always make sure to hit save and use the navigation options inside. For the climate matching questions, again, if you didn't know as an evaluator, make sure to look at their climate matching results PDF that should be linked at the top of the evaluation. Where is similar to California? You need to reference that. And I just want to make sure everyone's clear on where that is. So let's try, I don't know this one. I hope this was done correctly. Let's try one of mine. My evaluations. Yeah, sure. Okay. Hopefully I linked it. You're in the evaluation and you're going to review it. You have your help downloaded, so you know how they should have answered the questions, and you're going through, you're going to add an evaluation issue, but you need to make sure you have your help there. I would have the matching results also right there. So click on the matching results. You can have that so you can know whether they answered this correctly and this correctly, etc. So have the climate matching map handy when you're doing that. Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, severity. So the idea is either it's a major or a minor issue when you're in the drop down as an issue. You've added an issue, you thought about the scope, you chose the scope. Question 6, now is it a minor issue where it's not something that actually changes the answer, or is it a major issue? This is going to change the answer to the question. This needs to be fixed. So use those as described. Incorrect information, incomplete information, etc. Pretty straightforward. Suggestion or comment. So suggestion is actually, I'm suggesting that you change this. So this needs to be resolved. I'm suggesting you change this. A comment is, this is some information about the evaluation. I would say don't make extraneous comments that don't affect things at all, but definitely it's something that is more, more of a comment than they have to go in and change this. So consider this other literature, I don't know. And all they should have to do is mark resolved, but they might actually change the evaluation, if that makes sense. Issue description. I mean, obviously we are all professionals, so be polite but concise as possible, because they might have 20 issues they have to fix on this evaluation, and they've just spent 3 hours doing it. So be efficient with your time and with their time. Include additional sources only if they really are lacking to support the answer, and target all the necessary issues. But we're not going to nitpick about grammar or word choice unless it's really confusing. Sometimes it can be confusing. Maybe as an evaluator, it feels nitpicky, but it actually changed how we read the question. So try to stick to those cases, and don't feel bad about adding as many issues as you need. That's what we need for the integrity of the process, is for people to make sure it's the integrity is intact. So, and often, you might have 2 reviewers, you might have several reviewers actually doing this. So that's what we really want, the best information. To provide, again, this is where I put it, sorry, the professional observation. I would write exactly what you want to have in the question. As my professional opinion is I have seen this, invading in meadows, in lagoons, in XYZ, again, quote it. It's just easier than adding information that they have to paraphrase. So just put your own words down and put your name, affiliation, and the date. And then you click save. And that's kind of most of the process. So it's helpful, but not, it's actually kind of a system quirk. You actually don't have to click reviewed at the bottom, but if you do click reviewed, it'll add your name to the list of reviewers for the evaluation. And then of course, once you're done, notify the data manager that you've completed it. So that's all I had for that. And I want to go back to looking at the system really quickly, assuming we have time. How am I doing on time, Utah?
I think we're good.
Yeah, you got a good time. We're at 10:30 right now, 10:32.
Do I have questions before I look at the system again? No.
Not on the chat.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you've been assigned to review a plant, and you've logged in. Okay, you've logged into pre. So I'm going to look at evaluations. And again, we're going to, look at something. I don't know. We need that fake evaluation to play with, but I'll try not to mess this up. Okay, so here's an evaluation, and I'm going to go ahead and read it. Again, you could download a PDF and just look at the PDF. You could also scroll through, get their climate matching map. You can, read it this way. And then, okay, I've gone through, oh, I see an issue with this answer, number 2. Okay, number 2, this was reviewed. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna, will it really mess it up if I add an evaluation issue? Alex, should I not do this? I think I can cancel, right?
I think you could delete it,
Okay.
or you don't have to submit it. You could just,
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so here, I'll just show you the download.
Is it one of yours, Lynn? I missed.
No, this is a Farm Bill for Illinois.
It's okay. They're probably not checking in on that still.
All right. I could do one of mine. Maybe that would be safer. Let's do one of mine. Okay. All right. Sorry. Let's go back pre and my evaluations, and let's see one with issues. Yeah. Okay. So, but now you're a reviewer. Remember, we're not editing the evaluation. We scroll down, we see an issue with this answer. Okay. Question 2. That's not a good enough answer. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and I think it'll let me add an evaluation issue on my own. Okay. Add evaluation issue. Okay. Now you're creating an issue. Again, scope, you have a drop down to put, evaluation notes as a whole, or, let's say, okay, it's about question 2. I think the severity is it's going to change the outcome of this answer, what they said. Okay, so it's a major thing. Usually major would be a suggestion, I would think, because it has to be changed. And then, type, change something. Okay, all right. And you type your answer, and because they're not going to know who typed this otherwise, okay, put my name in, and that's all. And so I am going to go ahead and save and then try to delete it. But this is for the screener. Remember, screener, I'm using evaluator and screener are the same. We are a reviewer right now. So this is for the screener evaluator. They can fix or not fix. Let's see, associations. Okay, yeah. I guess it'd be good to make sure you're in the right evaluations, or the right plant. So go ahead and make sure that's right. And then click save. And then maybe I don't need to click save. And then it'll go back. Well, let's see. Okay. All right. So here, now I'm in the view, and here's my change something. Okay. Somebody's going to get an email maybe. Okay. And then notice how I think you
I was wondering, Lynn, do you get notifications when there's an issue added? Okay.
No, but I think there's a setting somewhere. I think I remember there's a setting you can opt. I think it's an opt-in though. So it's fine. I'll delete it. Let's see, 67, 65. Okay. So
you can also mark it resolved, and that way it doesn't look like you have a unresolved issue.
Right. What I wanted to do is make sure people know. So it's opened this separate, see, it's opened a new window, and then I still have this, okay? And so the best idea is for me to say, okay, all set in this window, close it. And now, I don't know if we have to put refresh. We do have to put refresh, don't we? Okay, 0 of 2. Let's refresh it and see what happens. Now there's unresolved 1 of 3. So there's 1 unresolved issue of 3 total. And now we're going to go ahead and add another evaluation issue. So, and that's how you proceed. So again, if you're evaluating, let's say you're even doing multiple evaluation, or you're reviewing multiple evaluations, make sure you are in the correct window when you come back. This actually happened when I was looking over some of your evaluations. I was doing lots of them, and I put some issues in the wrong people at first, but I fixed it. Just to make sure. So you scroll to the top. I should be evaluating Lynn Sweet's Salsola, so because once you get down here, you don't really see their name anymore. So just make sure you have, see, that's my name as a reviewer, but just make sure you're in the right one. So, okay. And that's what I've got. I think that's all for evaluating. Questions?